Once you know how to use libraries and lists in SharePoint, you will find lots of reasons to add new lists or library apps to your site. In order to do this, we'll start by going to Site Contents. We want to make sure that this is the site we'd like to add an app to. I can't from here add something, for example, to my sports site. So it has to be here, but I'm in the right place. I'm going to click on Site Contents, and we've been here before. This is where we see the apps that we have already. But we can also now add another app. And I'm going to simply click Add an App, and there's a list, and there's actually 2 pages. So there's 1 through 16 here, and when we click, there are even more here on this second page. Now you might wonder, there's some at the top that are listed as noteworthy. How were those selected for me? And the answer would be, they appear on every single site in this collection. So they're noteworthy because people use them a lot. They could also say frequently used, for example. We are already using a document library. We're already using a tasks list here. And you've seen a custom list. That's that customers list that we were working with recently. That was a custom list. Down below, then, we have lots of other choices, including the choices that are already pulled out and listed as noteworthy. So I have document libraries, form libraries, wiki page libraries, and so on. All these different libraries that I can create. We're going to create a library in a moment, and the type we'll create will actually be a document library. If you want to know more about any one of these, just go ahead and click, and you'll see more information, and you can then click Add It if this is the one you want. But if not, simply click your breadcrumb here, Add Apps, and you'll return to the Apps page here in your site contents. Now, some of these lists have exciting things going on with them. For example, the Contacts list and the Calendar list, they both synchronize with Microsoft Outlook. Check it out. If you click on App Details, it says Contact lists can synchronize with Microsoft Outlook and other compatible programs. If it exists in Outlook, look for its match here, because there's our Contacts, there's our Calendar, and here is our syncable Tasks list. So all of these can exchange information with Outlook. Issue tracking is a really fabulous type of a list that you can use, for example, if you're developing a new product, if you want people to be able to submit tickets or issues like they would at a help desk. Anytime you're collecting information about something that's in process, whether it's software development or some kind of a new training you're rolling out, that issue tracking list is really great, and we'll actually create one later on in this course. We also have discussion boards. Those are lists. And promoted links. That's a set of links together, and we have one of those on our site when we first come in, and it asks if we want to change our site and add some functionality to it. Here's a custom list that we create from scratch. So we would specify what the different columns are that we'd like to see in that list and what type of data is in them, whether it's dates or texts or numbers. Or I could say I want to create a custom list just like I would if I was in Excel. So go ahead and give me that blank grid and let me begin creating my list from scratch. I can also say that I'd like to go grab an external list, and that's a great thing to do because that means that we can pull that list into SharePoint here. And there's a survey, and it's also a type of list. When we go to our second page and skip past the noteworthies, we have the ability to create a library, not a list, but a library of data connections, a library of reports, a library of different types of assets, and when you see assets, think multimedia. We have the ability to connect to and import a spreadsheet, like from Excel. And then we have an Access app that's really pretty specific. Its description is very plain, Access web app. But if you're an Access developer or if you have an Access database you use a lot, you'll love being able to connect that database here and show it in your SharePoint site. So many choices. The list that we want to create is a links list. Let's go look at the details because a links list allows us to have a list of web pages or other resources. So for example, if I wanted to have 5 or 6 links to documents or websites or self-help articles that I would like to have people read, this is how I'll do it. So a links list is a great way to be able to keep track of useful information that folks have found in a place that you can point to with a URL, whether that URL is going someplace else in your intranet, if it's going to the World Wide Web, or if it's going to a file share. This is what I'd like. I'm going to click Add It. And the first thing I have is the ability to pick a name. I'm going to go ahead and click Advanced Options so you can see that there's really not much that is that advanced. And now I'm going to say something that you will hear me say over and over again in SharePoint. If I'm only asked for a name, this name is going to get used in the URL. And so, for example, if I wanted to have a list of links that were for new employees, I might say, oh, cool, we'll call this the New Employee Links List. But if I do that, because it has spaces in it, every place that there's a space, ultimately when this is converted to a URL, you'll never have a space in a URL. That space will actually be replaced with the ASCII character for a space, which is %20. And then the next space will be the same way, %20. Every single time you see %20 in a URL, somebody left a space. Now, we're going to leave spaces in URLs because we have files that have spaces in their names, and they'll have the same issue. But notice that what really kind of looked like a cool name makes a pretty bad URL. More than that, the maximum length for a URL is 255 characters. And you might think, well, that's a lot. But actually it isn't, because if we imagine that our site, to begin with, has a decently long name, https://insidenoi.sharepoint.com/_layouts, and the hits just keep on coming. This keeps going and going and going. And then we're going to have / the name of our library, and then / the name of an individual item, if it was a document library, or here, /list, and then individual rows. So it gets too long too fast. So here's what we do. We give this a brief and reasonable name. And then in the next few movies, you're going to see how you can modify this library. And we're going to turn this short name that we're going to use in a URL into a longer name that we feel like seeing at the top of a page and in our quick launch. So this is an employees link list for new employees. So let's just say new MPL links. That's not bad. It's pretty short. Altogether, we've got 12 characters. That's a nice goal. And anybody who read that would see what it was in a URL, but then we'll offer a description too. So this is links to sites provided for new employees. That's good enough for now. And I'm going to click Create. And when I do that, I'll get a new links list. And this is what it looks like. It's pretty basic. So I can go in and I can say, I'd like to click and fill something in, but I'm just going to go to Items and say, I want to create a new item. It says, okay, what's the web address? Well, let's say, for example, that we wanted to point them to the Office site on Microsoft.com. So that's office.microsoft.com. I can click here to make sure it actually goes there, and it'll test it for me. There we go. That works. I like that. It opened it on a new page, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. And this is going to be the Microsoft Office site. Now, that's mostly what's going to show up when we use this in a links list, but I can also provide some notes. For example, I might want to say new employees can access documentation and other resources for Microsoft Office. And let's just get rid of the word new, and I can even just turn it into a verb. Access documentation and other resources for Microsoft Office. It's that command form. The U is implied. So that looks great. I like that. There's our first item that we're adding to our links list. Notice that the link is actually a link. When I click here, it's going to take me back to that Microsoft site, and here's my note about this particular link. So that's how I create a new list. And notice that I get all of the ribbons and everything else that we would expect to see. Items and list and back to browse if I wish. And because I've used it recently, it sits over here in the recent list, but it has not been added to the quick launch. We'll learn how to do that shortly. Now I'd like to also create a library that we don't have. So let's go to Site Contents. And in addition to this links list, I want to create a document library for the documents that new employees need to read. It'll have our employee orientation manual in it and all of those types of things. But it's storing documents, so I need a library. And I specifically need a documents library. So let's click Add an App, and I'm going to choose Document Library. And the same thing applies about the name here. I'm not offered an opportunity to enter a URL, and therefore whatever I enter as the name will be turned into part of the URL. So this is a new employee orientation library, but let's just say new EMPL, and we'll just leave it. Or we could put LIBR for library. That works as well. And this is mandatory documents for all new hires and rehires. There we go. Now we have a couple of more pieces of information for a library than we did for a list. We need to say whether or not every single time somebody edits a document here that it creates a new version. And we're going to leave this at no for now. And then the second thing is when somebody goes and creates a document by saying new on the ribbon, what kind of application should open? Are most of the documents in here going to be Word documents? Or might they be legacy Word documents that are backwardly compatible? Might we want to be able to create spreadsheets or presentations? So you can imagine that if you had, for example, a finance library, you might just change this so that it was Microsoft Excel. If you had a library that you were keeping presentations in, you might choose PowerPoint presentation. We're going to go ahead and leave this just as it is with a Microsoft Word document. That's the default. And now with everything set, we're going to click Create, and here's our new library, just like that. It appears on the Quick Launch as a recent link because that's what it is, right over here. We'll find out later how to modify this library so that it appears on the Quick Launch if we'd like it to do that. So if I go back home and we click Site Contents, notice now that our new library here and our new links list both appear. They'll be new for a while. Tells us how long ago we created them, and they're now part of our site. Even though they don't show up on the Quick Launch, they're right here. And if I wanted to add documents right now to my library, I could just click here, go visit that library and say, I'd like to upload a document, for example, or I'd like to create a new document, and it will create a Word document because that's what it says. We have the ability, just as we did in the libraries and lists that we've used earlier, to sort and to filter the items that are in our library and list that we created just now. That's how easy it is to create new libraries and new lists in SharePoint Online.